Yeah, so we'll just get started in a couple minutes. I just want to introduce myself and James. We're actually the hosts of this meetup group from Terranova Defensein-depth, james.castle, and myself, Brandon Krieger from Uzado. We do cybersecurity compliance and cybersecurity services. Tonight, we're actually going to be having some really kind of good information. Love to kind of just first connect with you guys, see where you guys are all from, and what you like to get out of tonight's event. If you want to just put in the chat and just let us know kind of where you're from and what would you like to get out of this event. Okay, guys, like I said, this is the Cybersecurity Global Meetup, the future of cybersecurity defense. We really want to bring this group together, discuss kind of the cutting edge and leading trends when it comes to cybersecurity, and have experts come out and to really discuss what they're thinking about cybersecurity and how they're looking at protecting their industry and their people. Few housekeeping tips right now. What we're going to do is there's going to be two presenters tonight, which is going to be 45 minutes in length each. There's going to be Q&A at the end. This meetup is going to be recorded, so if you know someone or you have to go early, you can actually check this out on a YouTube channel. We'll actually post it in the meetup group that once it's posted, so you guys will see it. Again, like I said, Q&As are going to be at the end. If there's time, depending on how much time we have left, we'll break out to rooms where you can talk to the other members of the meetup group and collaborate, discuss kind of what you guys are doing in the industry, and really learn about what you guys are doing in cybersecurity. So our first speaker is going to be Detective Constable Kenrick Bagnall. Kenrick has been a member of the Toronto Police Service since April of 2006 and currently serves as an investigator in the Coordinated Cyber Center, which is C3 of the Intelligence Services. Prior to joining the Toronto Police Services, Kenrick spent 20 years in the information technology industry, primarily in the financial service sector. And he's held the position of Senior Network Analyst, Information Technology Manager, and Senior Vice President of Information Technology. Kenrick is also Associate Professor at George Brown College, where he's designed and instructed the cybersecurity fundamentals and cybersecurity incident response and recovery courses, and also lectures on the University of Toronto Global Professional Masters of Laws, Innovation, Law, and Technology program. A second here. And Kenrick is a regular contributor to Canadian Security Magazine and has published and has been published in Cybersecurity in Canada, A Guide to Best Practices, Planning and Management, LexNinix. Kenrick's background in information technology combined with his law enforcement experience has uniquely positioned him as an investigator, instructor, and a presenter of technology, information security, and cyber investigation. So Kenrick will be our first presenter. And then our next presenter will be a team, which will be Chad Wingless. He's the president CEO of head program of CEW Systems Canada. He's worked in the engineer field with extensive experience in programming, complex engineer software tools, former president of Third Day Software, a CAD programming company created of a program users interface tool set for AutoCAD programmers called Object DCL. And then we have the website there for you, which allow programmers to easily create programming user interface tools for the original AutoCAD programming tool set called AutoLips. And then Dave Polex is the vice president and CTO of electronic hardware engineer at the CEW Systems Canada. He teaches electronics engineer. He has extensive experience with security, physical hardware, and network systems. Former president of IT Consortium, IBM Canada business partners. So those are our two presenters today, and we're going to have like a lot of great information. So if you guys can do, like I said, a little bit of housekeeping, just make sure everyone's muted, their camera's off, because we are recording this, so this help with the bandwidth. And right now, I will introduce Kenrick.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate that. I'm just going to try and get my screen share going here.
There you go.
Perfect. Screen 2. And okay, just confirm that you've got that, Brandon.
Yeah, we're all good.
Perfect. Thank you. And thanks both to you and to James for the invitation and for organizing this. This is it's a challenging time for everyone. And, I think certainly within this type of industry, we have to, it's incumbent upon us to stay on top of technology and what's going on, because it's a rapidly changing landscape with a lot a lot going on. I think for this presentation, it was challenging because the key point I want to drive home to help everyone out, whether you're working in the industry or you're just a technology user and an internet user and you have concerns about cybersecurity, I could probably deliver that message in about 5 minutes, but to actually lay the groundwork for that would probably take about 5 hours. So since I was given 45 minutes, I tried to strike the balance in getting everything across. So by way of agenda, and it's not really agenda, it's more of a guideline. I think the real win in this type of thing is the Q&A and sharing information, because in as much as I'm hoping there's some good takeaways and you guys learn from me, I want to learn from you guys as well. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the agency. You may not know much about Toronto Police, especially the cybercrime unit, but just letting you know a little bit about us. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the cybercrime threat landscape and sort of lay the foundation for that, for the primary message of this talk. During this year, there's obviously been a game changer, and it's the elephant in the room, and we'll definitely talk about that. It's been impactful. What are we doing as law enforcement, and how is it impacting us, and what are we doing to sort of adjust to these changes during this very difficult year, and how's it's impacting everybody else, and what can you do, and sort of the crossroads of everything that's been going on and how it's impacted cyber has really created a perfect storm. And it'll be pretty clear, really what the messages of that is by the time I get to it. Keyboard is not cooperating here. Here we go. Okay, so Toronto Police. So Toronto Police is we're the largest municipal agency in Canada, but what a lot of people don't know is we're the 5th largest in North America, coming behind New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and we're tied with Houston, depending on how many people are getting hired or how many retirements are happening in that one particular year. But we're a pretty large agency. We're also the oldest municipal agency in Canada, which is a not commonly known fact. Toronto Police was established in 1834, making it the oldest municipal agency in all of North America. Now, the internet's been around for a little while, and cybercrime has been an issue. But in terms of the agency forming a unit, that didn't really come to be until late 2014. Most large police agencies have specialized units for different areas of criminality. And it became apparent within my jurisdiction that our agency needed a specific unit to work on this thing called cyber. And that unit was formed in 2014. I had the privilege of joining the unit in 2015, and it's been a great ride so far, and I'm still learning, still growing, and we've evolved to the point where we've gone from being the computer cybercrime unit to being now what's called the Coordinated Cyber Center, in that we now have 22 officers, we have 4 civilians, we have 3 different areas of specialization in terms of our roles within the unit, and we're understaffed. There's a lot going on in the space. And, one of the things I really like to get across, especially with people getting into cybersecurity, and I noticed that there were a couple in the chat that saying that, they were, getting into that part of their career after finishing school and things like that. People think of law enforcement. Law enforcement is it's enforcing the laws on the books, but more and more we're seeing more statutes related to cyber and internet crime. So that's definitely a space where, if you have an interest in that type of work, where there's a massive opportunity for career growth and a career path. So before I lay the groundwork for what's dominating cybercrime in terms of the threat landscape and discussing those 4 items there, I usually like to talk about cyber risk when it comes to cybercrime, and without getting into detail here, it really focuses on 3 areas, and that's system susceptibility, system accessibility, and and the threat capability, which is really the adversary. So if you think about those 3 things and keep them kind of in the back of your head as I go through these points, you'll see where they all really fit in quite well. So business email compromise. Now, let me preface all of this by saying that this is not necessarily stuff that you're reading about online or hearing in the news. This is from a law enforcement perspective. So these four things are, within the top half dozen or so of the things that we're seeing in terms of what's being reported to us from a law enforcement perspective. So business email compromise, it's a challenging issue. That we all know that probably more than half of the cybercrime that's taking place today is initiated through email. And this is where, with business email compromise, there's a lot of social engineering involved. Funds are moved, and it's often very, very, very difficult to get it back. We're seeing it happening through different industry verticals. It's not just manufacturing or financial services or insurance. We're seeing it across all industry verticals. At the end of the day, it's about the money. In the example here, Mattel, which is a famous toy company, 5 years ago, they were compromised, $3 million just gone. In this particular case, the money moved to a bank in China. There's several cases that we're investigating today that are very, very similar. We don't necessarily want to point a finger of blame to any one country or geographical region, but there is enough historical evidence to show that there are some regional or geographical correlations between the type of cybercrime that's happening and the country it's being perpetrated from. So we definitely see a lot of Eastern Europe or Asian related nation state type of criminality. We definitely see a lot of extortion out of Southeast Asia and fraud out of different parts of West Africa. So there are some geographical correlations, but business email compromise has been on the rise. It's an issue that is rooted in social engineering, and there are definitely mechanisms that can be put in place to mitigate them. It really comes down to awareness and good communication within an organization to help thwart this type of problem. The insider threat. Now, the insider threat is really, really a huge problem. And if you think about what I talked about initially in terms of the cybercrime risk assessment and looking at susceptibility and accessibility and threat capability, well, if you look at the second one for accessibility, this is usually where cybersecurity and physical security meet. And the insider threat becomes really challenging because you have an adversary who already has physical access. They have logical access in terms of credentials to access systems and data sets and files. And for whatever reason or reasons, this person becomes compromised. And one of the things I always say is that, people talk about cybersecurity and, the problems that it, where is it really rooted? And, billions of dollars are being spent globally on the problem, yet we're hearing about breaches almost on a weekly basis, right? Well, the reality is that cybersecurity is not a technology problem, it's a human problem. So if you have the humans are at both ends of the continuum, and the insider threat has become a very big problem because of that. We all know what happened not too long ago with the Equifax breach. It was all over the news, major issues, a lot of customers impacted, and it was an insider threat. Now, one of the things that we've seen through investigations of insider threats is that, again, being a human problem, there are definitely signs and precursors, both from a human resources perspective and from a technology perspective. So within an organization, if HR and IT or information security had conversations around potential issues before they become a red flag, then then law enforcement may not even necessarily be called. I think it's really determining what events or what constellation of events actually constitutes an actual incident, an actual cyber incident. Because let's face it, I mean, most organizations are being scanned on an hourly basis, on by the minute, and event logs are being populated. But at what point are all of those events within the right context constituting an actual incident where some sort of mitigation or incident response needs to be triggered. So a really good understanding of that can go a long way in thwarting some of these. From an insider threat perspective, a human problem, the adversary is already in your organization. They're susceptible potentially to some sort of social engineering, but having that conversation internally can definitely help make a difference. Endpoint security. This is massive. This is massive not only because of the growth and proliferation of IoT devices that are out there, but also the massive expansion of the physical landscape. Now, again, circle back to cybercrime risk assessment and the components there being, vulnerability in terms of physical access, in terms of the threat capability. You now have a massive, in fact, exponential growth in the threat landscape, because depending on what statistic you read, you're going from maybe 20 to 35% of organizations with workers working from home to probably on average around 80 or 90 now, because of the current pandemic situation. So endpoint security becomes a massive, massive problem and potential risk. And we're seeing a lot of cyber threats being exploited because of weak endpoints. And then now this is an issue that you have to deal with within an organization, but also you have to deal with it at home for your own personal cyber hygiene and your own personal cyber security. But now you're not just doing that at home as a private citizen, but now in a lot of cases, you are also working at home. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, because I think it's a really, really important point. Again, endpoint security, laptops, excuse me. Laptops are being taken home. A lot of times they're not being secured properly. A theft of a laptop can result in a lot of customer records being compromised. And if only there was some sort of encryption put on that laptop ahead of time, then effectively in the case of a lost or stolen laptop, that device is now just a brick. So a lot of these security mechanisms absolutely have to be put in place. If they weren't put in place before, they have to be put in place. In 2018, a loss of almost 34,000 healthcare related records were compromised from a stolen laptop. Easily preventable if there was some proper encryption put onto that laptop. Endpoint security, major issue, major source of major vector of cybersecurity and incidences happening that are getting reported to law enforcement. Ransomware. Now, I can't even understate this or overstate this enough. This has become become a major issue. It was a major problem a couple of years ago. We thought we had it under control. New strains have come out. Greater strengths of encryption are now being used. The keys, to unlock encrypted files because of ransomware are not readily available. In 2018, we thought the problem was under control, but it's made a massive comeback. And we're on the verge of a massive growth in technologies like AI and machine learning and quantum computing, and this is going to make an issue or a concern like ransomware, because of the cryptography component, even brought that much more to the forefront. So in terms of reporting, 300%. Now we're looking at year over year between 2018 to 2019 to today, an increase of about 300% year over year of ransomware cases being reported to law enforcement. Now that may come across as a really, really high number, and you probably think, wow, 300%, that's crazy. But the reality is that it's much higher because of the statistical underreporting. There are a lot of agencies and, organizations, I should say, and individuals who simply do not report to law enforcement for different reasons. They're concerned about reputational damage or, and these are, I'm not saying definitively that these are the reasons why organizations don't report, but these are just things that I've heard about, I've read about. And at the end of the day, whether it's ransomware or some other type of cyber threat, being reported to law enforcement is not a law enforcement decision. It's a business decision for the organization. It is a personal decision for the person that becomes a victim of cybercrime. In the case of ransomware, we're getting more and more reported to us. A lot of times organizations are reporting because they feel they need to report because of cyber insurance, or they feel that they need to report because now it becomes a client relation issue, and under PIPEDA, it's mandatory that they report to the privacy commissioner. So as part of that, they will also report to law enforcement as well. But historically, there's been an underreporting, and I'll talk about the importance of reporting a bit more later on. But it's a challenge, and with whether it's business email compromise, insider threats, vulnerabilities, and criminality through endpoint security as a vector, or ransomware, that's an area we can all definitely improve on, is in terms of the reporting. So that's the top four. Now we talked about the game changer. Now this is the game changer. This is absolutely the game changer. Everybody's going along late 2019 into early 2020, and then all of a sudden, we get hit by a global pandemic. And this is not something that's impacting a particular geographical region, country, culture. This is an equal opportunity biological threat in the form of this virus, and it's impacted the entire world. And it's changed the way we live, it's changed the way we work, it's changed the way we communicate. It has literally changed everything. And the question may be asked, well, who saw this coming, or we should have been more prepared. Well, the fact is, back in March of 2015, Bill Gates gave a TED Talk where he specifically talked about the potential impact of a global pandemic. And here we are 5 years later, over 5 years later now, in the middle of it. And the impact is far reaching. And we most of us suspect, regardless of our discipline, that the impact is going to carry on well into 2021. So I spoke a little bit about the endpoint security piece, and it kind of impacts this thing that I called the residential threat landscape, because there is now so much going on within the confines of the home. I mean, before, if you look at your digital footprint in your home before COVID-19, you had smart devices, you had your broadband internet, and you were streaming content, and maybe doing some work from home. If there were kids in the household, you had video games that were being played. You had all sorts of stuff that was happening. Now the reality is, you have an issue of what I call endpoint security times 10 to the N. You have so much going on within that household now, and it starts with really securing and making sure that router, that residential router, is completely secured. And when I say that, I mean things like changing the router name, changing the SSID from default, changing administrator passwords from default, making sure firmware is up to date. Working from home, a minimum of two-factor authentication is being used. One of the things that we've noticed, unfortunately, within law enforcement is an increase in threats against children, over the internet, because now kids are not just playing their video games online. They're home a lot, and they're getting their education as well online. This is how they're interacting with their friends. So their screen time has gone way up. So Unfortunately, what we've seen from a criminal perspective is that, you know, the stalkers that are out there looking to victimize children, these things have happened. These things are on the increase. So we can't forget the most vulnerable among us in terms of victimization, which are seniors, and of course, you know, the children. Um, so, you know, whether you're working from home, you know, talk to your IT people, make sure that there's encryption on your laptop, make sure there's multi-factor authentication, get some tips from your IT people at work. Talk to your carrier, whoever that may be. I know it's not just Bell, Rogers, or Telus. We have people in the US. So, you know, whoever your carrier may be, talk to them about security issues concerning your home router, and get that thing locked down, and making sure that, you know, you're using proper security with your VPNs and everything else like that. I can't stress enough, because that has become the new focal point for cyber attacks, is in the home, because there is now so much going on. All your IoT devices, make sure the firmware is up to date. You know, we could spend probably, you know, an hour just on this topic alone. But to move on very, very quickly, because there is a limited amount of time. Now, it never ceases to amaze me. I've been a police officer now for a little over 15 years, and never ceases to amaze me the lows that criminality will go to for the sake of financial gain. And what's happened with COVID-19 now is that you've seen a massive uptick in cyber attacks against hospital networks, which are mission critical to critical care, you know, long-term healthcare facilities. You're seeing research centers, colleges, and universities being cyber attacked, you know, on the increase because of the research that's gone on around a vaccine. Law firms, because law firms often hold confidential client data and information and records and potential patent pending information being administered by law firms. So they become targets, and attacks on those organizations have been on the increase. You know, charitable organizations, in terms of fundraising, that, you know, those things have been on the increase as well. You know, government agencies and organizations that are trying to provide financial relief because people are losing their jobs, those things are on the increase. There was a story not too long ago in the U.S. Some of our friends in the U.S. could probably relate to this. In Washington State, you know, the financial relief that was being provided there at a state level was compromised because of identity theft. And when people were legitimately going to apply for financial relief, they were being told by government authorities that their claim had already been paid. But meanwhile, you know, false IDs that have been compromised were being used by cyber criminals, and that money was gone. And the probability of returning those funds or retrieving those funds is unfortunately virtually zero. So, you know, at a time when people who have the resources are trying to help, and those who do not have are trying to seek help, this is a time where, you know, you think one would hope that humanity would shine and show its positive side, but you have cyber criminality that are just simply trying to take advantage of it. And my opinion, both personally and professionally, is that we're seeing the tip of the iceberg of it, and there is, unfortunately, there's more to come. So, in terms of impact and response, you know, there's been a huge impact on law enforcement as we try to continue the mandate of serving and protecting and keeping everyone safe. You know, we in some cases, depending on where we're working, are being, you know, working remotely as well. Obviously not uniform front line, but the issues of dealing with case management and going through the court processes are challenging during these times. Yet we still have to look at, you know, we're faced with resource issues, and we're faced with an increase because of the pandemic of different types of cyber crime being reported to us on an increase now, specifically because of the pandemic. And there it is again, standing out, ransomware. We're seeing it more and more and more. And, the best defense is always a good backup, but having a good backup is no good unless the mechanisms are there to actually test the recovery. And, I'll talk about, the planning side of it a bit more in a couple minutes. Uh, we're still doing continued awareness and outreach. I mean, this meetup conference and presentations that are happening now, it's all in the name of awareness. And you can never really do too much. You have to keep raising the bar. With the increase, we're still trying to manage and triage. We are working quite actively and aggressively with our law enforcement partners, not just across Canada, but also all through North America and around the world. From our agency perspective, we do a lot of work, obviously, with the RCMP, but we do a tremendous amount of work with the FBI, with the Secret Service, with Interpol, Europol. That's the interesting thing about cyber criminality, is that it does not see, any type of jurisdictional or country border. It's a borderless crime in a bordered world, and it's very, very, very challenging. One of the great resources, there are a couple of really good resources that are out there, is the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, Government of Canada website. You can find a link there. A lot of really good information. Also, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. Now, this is current up to probably just about a week ago. In terms, again, of incidents reported to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, you're looking at almost $7 million of hard losses that Canadians have experienced directly related to COVID-19 fraud. Now, again, keep in mind statistical underreporting of about 10 to 1. So now, if you factor that in, you're looking at potentially upwards of close to $70 million in losses for Canadians at a time where, so many people are out of work because of the pandemic. And, it's challenging. So again, I'll talk about reporting in a bit more in a couple minutes. Let's get the next slide going here. So what can we do? What can we do? I talked about, with the ransomware, it's important to have a good backup. Well, you got to test these plans, whether it's within your organization or whether it's you as an individual. Have your own little personal tabletop exercise. What's going to happen if my password get compromised? Do I know, the number for law enforcement if I want to report it? My local law enforcement agency, if I want to report it? How quickly can I contact the credit bureau if I'm concerned about identity theft and financial losses, in that regard? Organizations should not only depend on their internal IT and internal technology people, but contracting external cybersecurity is always really important to do, because they give a different perspective. They're doing this type of work every day. Understanding regulatory obligations and compliances when it comes to things like PIPEDA and mandatory reporting to the Privacy Commissioner. Who are the customers and where are they domiciled? And, what type of regulations do you have to, be concerned with from an international perspective, from other jurisdictions? So there's a lot going on. And when I talk about the perfect storm, what I'm talking about is this thing called the internet that we become so dependent on that it's become, according to R versus Ward, the Ontario Court of Appeals from 2020, the judge in that case actually wrote about the internet, where he described it as the new meeting hall, library, shopping center. It is where we're doing our entertainment, streaming music, executing commerce, transferring funds. Never really designed to be secure, but we're dependent on it for so much. Now you factor in the pandemic, and literally this is what we're faced with today. This is the perfect storm for a massive uptick in cybercrime, a massive increase in vulnerability because you have so many people who are, who are out of work. They have either been directly impacted or they know somebody who's been impacted by the pandemic. So there are a lot of emotional and sociological vulnerabilities there because of it as well. And now look at the time of year that we're in. After going through all of this for the majority of 2020, we're now on the cusp of the holiday season. And if you think in the past that the holiday season was an interesting time where, I really need to be careful about, using ATM machines, using online banking, be really mindful of my personal identity. Never before, I believe, in the history of human interaction with technology and the internet has there ever been a time where we have to be even more cautious than before. There's a saying that, within cybersecurity, trust but verify. I would say we take a step back from that and trust no one or nothing at all. You're going to get them popping up on your phone. You're going to get them in your email. You're going to be potentially socially engineered, and you're thinking that this could be for you. But just if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Don't click on it. Right? There are fake charities, there are fake adversary groups, there are fake test kits for COVID-19. Know the organization. If you're not sure if it's actually a legit website, talk to somebody who may know. Check out the Canadian Center for Cybersecurity online. Check out the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center online. Look at the Toronto Police website. Look at the FBI website and the RCMP website to get trusted information on what some of these threats are. I don't want to see, as much as I'm an advocate for the reporting to law enforcement to be on the increase, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because the more it's on the increase, the more people are becoming victimized. But you really have to be more concerned than ever about cyber hygiene during this time. The end game for law enforcement is really, attribution. If you're working in cybersecurity, mediation and, tabletop exercising and planning and, trying to reduce the amount of, 0 days that get out there in the wild, these are all things that are very, very important. But when law enforcement become involved, our end goal is to make sure that victims of cybercrime get involved with us very, very early, that from an incident response perspective, that you have contacts within law enforcement for cybersecurity, so that we are part of your playbook, we are part of your incident response, and you know who to call to get things done. So if you take a step back and think about it for yourself from a personal perspective and also professionally within your organization, what's your plan? Because you have to have one. Law enforcement go through training because when a critical incident happens, all of the fine motor skills are gone and you're only left with your gross motor skills. And that's because of training. That's because of planning. So when you become a victim of cybercrime, or your organization becomes a victim of cybercrime, panic will set in. And if you haven't thought about it, if you haven't planned in advance, you may not know the right things to do. When John F. Kennedy gave his State of the Union address, he said the best time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining. And I from a cybersecurity perspective, I don't know how much the sun has been shining during 2020 because of everything that's been going on. It's a bit of that storm cloud that you see brewing to the left of the image there. But there's still time. There's still time to make a plan. There's still time to secure technology, update firmware, have a plan for yourself personally, and have a plan within your organization, because it comes as a cliche, but it's not if, but it is when you will become a victim of cybercrime. But at the end of the day, this is the goal. This is the goal. The goal is to have attribution, put someone behind the keyboard, and hold someone responsible and accountable for the cybercrime. Build a credible case and put it before the court that would stand a reasonable prospect of conviction. Within law enforcement, we can't do it alone. It starts with reporting. They say no victim, no crime. So if you do become a victim, or you know someone who's become a victim of cybercrime, make it a matter of record and contact local law enforcement and report it. So I think I've been going for just a little over 30 minutes now, which might leave us about 11 or 12 minutes or so for questions
Yep.
or comments. But I appreciate everyone's time, and I'm going to try and stick around as well for the speakers that are following. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kendrick. So got a few questions for you.
Sure, shoot.
Okay, so R asked, does Canada, such as your unit, ever prepare for fake media online, such as Australian soldier recently on the news, as those damages even huge than when you expect? So I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I am a little bit familiar with it. I mean, Australia, they're part of the Five Eyes, and their legal system is based on British common law, so it's very much like in Canada. It's a challenge because there are times, especially in the early days of cybercrime investigations, where things would happen, whether it's within media, within popular culture, or social media, especially, where there'd be the perception of criminality taking place, but there may not necessarily be anything on the books that we could actually enforce. I mean, within Canada, that changed a lot with Bill C-13, which upgraded a lot of the statutes to be a lot more modern and progressive, and future-proofed some of the statutes, because technology does change very, very quickly. If there's any question as to whether or not it is criminality from a cyber perspective, I think my suggestion would be to contact law enforcement and explain what happened. I said earlier that it all starts with the reporting. It's bigger than that, because we can't affect the judicial system unless we put cases before the courts, and we create this thing called case law, from which we have bills drawn up and we have laws passed. So it really does start with, unfortunately, it starts with victimization, but then that stuff needs to be brought forward to law enforcement and cases be put together and put before the courts. I hope that helps.
Perfect. Well, okay, so I have another question for you. Any suggestions for companies that are allowing everyone with admin rights? The top managers don't agree to change to regular users, particularly now working from home. This even creates more risk. They think other control sets can take care of the risks, such as behavior-based antivirus. So, what's your recommendations on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that being put forward. I mean, I've got two words: least privilege. You should have access to do your job, and that's where it should end. And in terms of top down, I mean, cybersecurity really needs to be driven top down, because you need to have buy-in first at the sort of that executive board level, and then have it driven down to the the people who are on the front lines doing the work day to day. But there's really no need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there's guidelines and best practices that are already out there in terms of the ISO 27000 series for information security, and 27001, I believe, and also the NIST framework, for information security. So there are models that are out there. So there's no excuse. It's not like someone has to go and kind of magically come up with it and create it on the fly, because the tools and the frameworks are out there. And I think certainly within the states, because I know the statutes are there, we're all responsible, whether you're a C-suite level executive, or you sweep the halls at 2:00 in the morning when nobody's there. Everyone is responsible for cybersecurity within an organization. However, those at the top of the food chain are accountable. So to answer that question, from part of that question in terms of the executives, you're not just responsible, you have an extra burden to carry, because you're also accountable. So it would be in your best interest to make sure that those guidelines are followed and implemented.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, I got a question from George. Does Canada have fusion centers? How do they operate and help during an event of a disaster? As we move to smart cities, how will fusion centers allow the general public to have the best updates for their connected computers. For example, pushing firmware software updates to counter vulnerabilities. Are there any thoughts on this?
I think that's a great question, and I think that we're heading in that direction. Um, Fusion Center is sort of like a title that's given. I mean, if you look at within Toronto itself, there are the city of Toronto does have emergency management, a really large and complex emergency management um, engine, if I can call it that. There have been things happening within the city for smart cities. Canada as a whole has the Center for Cybersecurity, the National Center for Cybersecurity out of Ottawa, where I am now. You're looking at academia with organizations like the Cyber Catalyst program at Ryerson. I know York University is doing quite a bit. Even at the college level, Sheridan College has a tremendous cybersecurity program. So I believe that we've got a long way to go when it comes to this type of
shingle that's hung out there that says this is the fusion center. I think all the components are there. I think they're gonna come together quite nicely in the near future, is my opinion.
Perfect. Now, Kim has a question. Are companies obligated to report apart from insurance?
Are they? That's a good question as well, and thank you, Kim. The obligation to report is really a regulatory compliance issue. So, if the customers are impacted, then according to PIPEDA, you need to report to the Privacy Commissioner in Canada. So, there's obligations to notify your customer. There's obligations to report to the commissioner. There's obligations to keep a record of everything that you did in terms of the mitigation, in the face of a cyber incident. Not an event, because events happen all the time. But for cyber insurance, I mean, you can have cyber insurance and then you just need to file a claim on your policy. There's nothing that says that you shall report to law enforcement. Selfishly, I would say it would be the smart thing to do, because really, there's really no other punitive measure in terms of attribution. But again, it's not a law enforcement decision. It's a business/personal decision as to whether or not a report is filed. So even with GDPR, so if you're an organization and you have data from a European Union domiciled citizen, you have certain regulatory compliance issues under GDPR, even though you're a Canadian or North American company. So that's where the enforcement is for reporting. It's not reporting to law enforcement.
True, very true. Got one more question for you. It's from R again. He has one more question about if it's possible. He's seen cases where he's seen compromises right around him and in his company, and he's wondering, do you have any links or info as how they can report a cybercrime? What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, okay, so we talked about regulatory compliance in terms of PIPEDA and GDPR, and there's other compliance guidelines in the States for HIPAA within the health industry, and the credit card industry as well. But from a criminal perspective, the best practice or the essential practice is really to report to local law enforcement, right? Now, if the organization is a massive organization and they even have their own general counsel, their own legal internally, assuming they have a incident response plan, they have some sort of external breach coach that's involved with them as well. They already have in their playbook who they're going to call, right? Mm-hmm. They could be a multinational headquartered in New York or headquartered in Toronto, so they know they're calling the RCMP or they're calling the FBI or whomever. But for the SMBs out there, it's you report to local law enforcement, and then you could have a Vancouver office, you could have a Toronto office, but you report to local, and then the report is taken, and then an investigation can ensue, so we can figure out we as law enforcement can then figure out, okay, who do we need to liaise with? I can tell you that 80, 90% of the cases, there's always other agencies involved, because that's just the nature of cyber, right? But it always starts with local law enforcement reporting. In Toronto, for Toronto Police, it's the non-emergency number at 416-808-2222. Cyber is not a go to the website, fill out a form report. It is not a recovered piece of luggage or a lost, recovered stolen bicycle or something like that. It's a bit more complex. So you need to contact local law enforcement. And if you're in a jurisdiction where there is no local law enforcement, then you look to the provincial level, or in the States, you look to the state level, or at least the county level, to an agency that can take the report and then push that up the chain.
Perfect. Now, I hope that answered your question for that. I know on my side, guys, just remember, like Kendrick said, follow kind of the policies of your organization and then police, and kind of work through the process too, right? Because like Kendrick said, there's a lot of companies that do have these processes in place. So to circumvent them sometimes and just go directly to the police, they might already have had things that are going on in the background. So make sure you escalate it within your internal company as well.
Absolutely, Brandon, because there's going to be a threshold. The organization will say, okay, well, if this happens, we will mitigate it internally. But you know what, if this happens, or if it's this widespread, or if it's this dollar value loss, then we're going to do this, this, and this, including law enforcement. So make sure that communication happens internally.
Yeah. And that comes down to, like you said, the incident response plan, correct?
Absolutely. You have to have the plan. You have to have the plan. Pull out the playbook. You're going to need it. Go through the steps.
Awesome, Kendrick. So any closing remarks, anything that you want to kind of give them one tidbit to walk away with for today?
Just be mindful of the current situation and where we are as a society, as a race. When I say a race, I mean the human race. I mean, we're all in this together. But there's a part of humanity that the criminal element that is looking to take advantage of this. So, be very, very mindful of how strong your passwords are, how you're securing something as fundamental and as essential as email. Have a look at these things. Do you have one email for everything that you're doing? Do you have multiple emails? Are you using the same password? Just go through a basic housekeeping of your own personal cyber safety and your own personal cyber hygiene, because these habits that you have personally on a day-to-day basis, you'll take them to work with you. So if you improve there, you will improve corporately as well. I just hope everyone stays safe. Follow what the smart people are saying, the scientists and our leaders are saying, and I think we'll all get through this fine.
Perfect. Now, you guys on the screen, take a screenshot. Kendrick's left his contact information on Twitter, his handles there, and I think it's on Twitter, and is that Facebook and Instagram?
Yep.
So if you guys want to follow him, just kind of keep up to date what he's working on, check him out. Kendrick, thank you so much. This was great. It's really helped kind of give the education of kind of what the police is doing and what they're working on. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
So next what we're going to have Chad and Dave on. Chad's going to be presenting what CEW systems is going to be working on. So it's going to be really interesting. Chad, so you ready?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you fine.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen. Is my screen sharing now?
You are all good. Good to go.
Okay, good. We are from CEW Systems Canada. We're a post-quantum encryption company. My name's Chad Wanis. I'm a software programmer and engineering technologist, former president of Third Day Software. My business partner, Dave Palachik, he's an electronics engineer and part-time college professor. He's former president of the IT Consortium, IBM Canada Business Partners. About us. We are headquartered in Saskatchewan, Canada, with the remote office in Ontario, Canada, in Ajax and Saskatoon. We have expertise in the following areas: software programming, encryption software and hardware, and electronics engineering. So food for thought. In 2015 is when the first true quantum computer came out. It was created by D-Wave. It's a company based. Somebody needs to mute their microphone.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, perfect. It's a D-Wave is a company based out of Burnaby, British Columbia, and they were able to make the first quantum computer. And I remembered when it came out at the time, people were even questioning, was it a real quantum computer and was it functioning? Well, Google and NASA both did a test on it and found that it indeed was a quantum computer, and it was able to process in 1 second what a classical computer could solve in 10,000 years. So last year, 2019, Google published an article on their new 53-qubit computer, which was able to calculate in 200 seconds what a supercomputer could solve in 10,000 years. So there is a jump from an ordinary computer to a supercomputer, still at the same processing time of 10,000 years, but able to process more data. And then last week, China published that their quantum research group was able to build and successfully test their photon-based quantum computer, which is able to calculate in 2 to 3 minutes what their supercomputer, it's the Sunway Taiwan Light computer, was able to take more than 2 million years by the world's first most powerful supercomputer. So in 2 minutes, they could process the same amount of time that would have been 2 million years on their supercomputer. So when I read through more as the detailed information came out, it still wasn't worried about a threat on our encryption as yet, but we still have a little ways to go before we have to worry about quantum computers breaking our encryption, but that day is coming, and there's no question about it. Now, what got us inspired to create encryption? Well, as Brendan had previously described, I had run a company called Third Day Software, and we made a programming tool called Object-DCL. Now, it was a user interface design program where you could draw and design your user dialog boxes on a screen, just the same as Visual Basic and C++. At the time, AutoCAD had a very simple text-based language for creating very simple dialog boxes. So I created this very complex user interface and set it up to work right within AutoCAD so that Autolus programmers could then interact and create user interfaces for their clients. Now, within a year of publishing this software, and they published it on a website with a lot of Oriental characters, text characters, put this hack up that would go into the file, find there's a trial lock or a trial flag that was in the file that said this was either a purchased file or it was in the trial file. If it was a trial file, when you ran it, you get an annoying pop-up saying this is a trial. Well, they were able to get in there and remove it. And I had programmed it using Microsoft's standard MFC C++ encryption file saving routines. And when I saw that and I started thinking, you know, this is out-of-the-box encryption. This should have been good enough, but it wasn't. Somehow they had, I guess, decompiled the software, found the encryption key, used that to unlock the file, decompiled the data that I was putting into the file, saw what was with and without the trial flag, and removed it. And then wrote a program to do that. So then I had to create something that would put a flag in on top of the standard encryption. So I couldn't trust the encryption anymore. So I wound up creating what actually wound up being the very first iteration of our symmetric encryption. So fast forward to 2000 and, oh, I'm missing a page, sorry. There it is. Got out of order, sorry about that. So fast forward to 2017, I was watching a television show, and it was one of those news channels where they had this consumer report, which caught my attention, and they had demonstrated how easy it was for hackers to remotely access or to activate and get into a car using the remote keyless system. Basically, they just walked up with a little iPad and a little scanner attached to it, and it sent out this signal until the car unlocked, and they were in. And then again, they do that again when they hit the start button, and boom, up it starts, and off they drove. And it's been discovered now that it's easier to steal a car with the right electronics tools than it was with the original keys type technology. So in response, this inspired me, and we developed a new type of encryption handshake that would work in a communication environment where radio signals could easily be intercepted and recorded. The encryption handshake being presented here today was designed for constantly changing challenge and counter-challenge codes intended to recognize and defend against brute force attacks, transmit command codes without directly encrypting and transmitting the codes, and has been expanded and modified to include capabilities for other numerous industries. Okay, so how does this correlate to quantum computers? Well, we quickly figured out when quantum computers were first becoming a real conscious idea in the internet and the world of IT that they could be a threat. And I realized that what I had come up with was not only good for car fobs, but actually quantum proof, or quantum resistant, I should say. And why is a quantum computer so powerful, and why are they a threat? So I got a couple of slides just to quickly go over generally what they are without getting into the real technical details. A quantum computer is a device that harnesses the power of quantum physics to perform computations. Quantum computers use particles which could be atoms, electrons, or photons as both a computational device and as a storage device. Each particle can store a qubit of information. A qubit can be any of four values. A left spin is equal to a 0. A right spin is equal to 1. There's also an up spin and a down spin. And it can be a combination of all four. So what is superposition? In quantum computers, superposition is where a qubit can be both a 0 and a 1 at the same time. This allows for two possible computational uses. It allows a computer to process far more data than available qubits. So this is the formula. Basically, it's 2 to the power of the number of qubits. So if you had an 8-qubit computer, it could process 256 bits. So this table here shows the number of qubits to the number of bits that it could process. So 2 to the 10 is 1,024 bits. 2 to 100 is 1 times 10 to 30 zeros in bits. And going all the way to the bottom, a quantum computer with 3.4 million qubits would be able to process 1 times 10 followed by a million zeros. So quantum computers can vastly outperform standard computers simply because they can process so much more data. Now there's another unique feature of superposition where instead of using the number of qubits to calculate more data, you can actually use it to calculate more possibilities of the data. So in this case, if you had an 8-qubit computer and you were using 256-bit RSA encryption, let's say, for example, it could calculate all 256 possible inputs simultaneously instead of one at a time. Simply put, a quantum computer can test every possible set of keys used to encrypt intercepted data. If the encryption formula is too simple, the program will find an answer instantaneously. In short, quantum computers are very efficient brute force attack computers. And one last little bit that most people don't understand, and it's something that's important for later, decoherence. It's the name given when qubit behavior decays and ultimately disappears. So the spin might stop spinning and it might start spinning in a different direction, for example. This happens when changes are not made to the qubit. And this is a law of physics. It can't be extended. It's basically you have 50 to 250 milliseconds before the memory starts disappearing from that particle. Real world examples. The best one that we're pretty sure is SpaceX. Their rocket landing system is actually a quantum-based or a quantum computer. They won't say which quantum computer, but it's what they use to calculate the landing of their rockets. Now, the quantum computer has to operate at almost near zero, so it's not actually on the quantum, or it's not actually on the rocket. It's actually onshore, probably nearby, communicating via radio. And the data is being sent back and forth, allowing it to calculate how to properly land. Other research areas that are actively being worked in is healthcare, marketing, meteorology, finance, and logistics. So post-quantum encryption and NIST. So the National Institute of Technology, or NIST, put out a call in 2017 for proposals for post-quantum encryption. 2 years later, in 2019, NIST started evaluating the round 2 submissions. In 2020, NIST narrowed selection down to 15 containing encryption methods. 2028 was their original announcement planned date, or their date for announcing which quantum encryption they were going to select. And then they revised it down to 2025. And then a few months ago, IBM announced their planned release date of their new quantum computer for 2023, which is a 1 million qubit computer. NIST, within a week, revised their planned release date to the year 2023. And then in September, D-Wave announced their first commercially available 5,000 qubit quantum computer. And then last month, a Finnish company called IQM announced plans to actually sell computers, quantum computers, starting in 2021. All the other companies, Google, IBM, D-Wave, and a number of others, their intention has always been to lease time on the quantum computers through the internet. This quantum company in Finland is planning to selling the computers themselves, which means quantum computers can get into the hands of possible bad actors, where before, by selling it as a service online, the companies would be able to police who had access. Once the computers are starting to be sold, that policing ends. And then, as I mentioned, last week, China announced their photon-based computer for 2020. As of today, CEW Systems has post-quantum encryption software developed and is brute force attack proof. So how does our system work in our software? Well, we've called it bisymmetric encryption. It's a standard encryption handshake that allows remote logins without transmitting a password, passcode, command codes, or even credit card data. Now, the reason why we call it bisymmetric is it is both an asymmetric encryption and a symmetric encryption at the same time. It's private public keys that you see in an asymmetric system, but it operates in a symmetric system of encryption, which is harder to crack. An asymmetric system like RSA, for example, uses a math formula to try and find a number that would be too hard or was thought too hard to calculate. Originally, computers were thought to be able to take the age of the universe, billions of years, to try and reverse calculate what the RSA encryption was. A year ago, I believe it was, there was a company that has a server where they can crack a 256-bit RSA encryption inside of 1 minute. And they figure that the 1000-bit RSA will be cracked soon, followed by the 2000-bit, which is now the standard encryption level. 2000 bits for RSA is, my understanding, 90% of encryption online right now. So, with bisymmetric encryption, the use of the challenge and counter-challenge codes provides the basis for the bisymmetric handshake. So it starts with the sender creating private keys from user login credentials. So this could be your credit card information. It could be your corporate login information in the case of a car fob. It could be serial numbers embedded into the car fob itself. So these numbers are used to create a private key that only you know. Then the sender, the computer, the device, could be smart device, smartphone, smartwatch, ordinary computer, tablet. It hashes the user ID and it creates a challenge code and encrypts it using the private keys, transmits that to the receiver. The receiver receives them, looks up your user ID, and then creates its own version of the challenge code from the data it's pulling from the database. So in the case of a credit card number, the credit card number was factored against itself and against your address you typed in, your email, your phone number, the PIN number on the back of the card. Creates a very long number. That becomes your private keys. In the case of a credit card company, it would do the same thing on its end. And if you typed in your information correctly, it will create the same private key. From there, it goes to the next step and creates public keys and test data. The public keys and test data are encrypted by the private key or by the challenge code key and sent back to the sender. The sender decrypts them using the challenge code, then modifies and re-encrypts the test data. This test data is then sent back to the receiver. The receiver decrypts and demodifies the test data. If the sent and received test data matches, it means that the user typed in their information correctly. And this then allows the computer to decide approve or disapprove. Now, in the case of a car fob, commands can be sent through the test data. So if you modify it with an encryption value 1, let's say, then that means you're intending to lock the car. If it's encryption type 2, it means you're intending to unlock the car. Encryption type 3 means you're going to remote start the car. And encryption type 4 would be unlock the trunk. So by defining or changing the test data, you can actually send commands without actually sending the command. The approval code is, and any additional data is then encrypted and sent back to the sender. The sender looks for the approval data, approval code, I should say, and then both the sender and receiver are free to send data back and forth. Salting. This is inserted random data. In cryptography, salting is where random data is used as additional input to a one-way function that hashes a password or any other type of data. Both the symmetric handshake and the CEW symmetric encryption algorithms use randomized data to salt the encrypted data. This is a typical standard system where, for example, in the case of the hash ID, you might put in a user ID that's 20 characters long, but the encryption is 40 characters long, so the other 20 are random bits of information. When encrypted, it becomes much harder to try and look for patterns because now half bit is random data. So the more random data that's in your encryption, the harder it is to try and decrypt. 100% salted data. With the exception of the user ID, which is hashed, which in itself is 50% random numbers. The bisymmetric handshake, all the rest of the data, the challenge code, the counter challenge code called the session keys, the test data, all of it's 100% created random data. This is possible due to the nature of using multiple random generated challenge and counter codes and counter challenge codes, sorry. An additional salting feature in our encryption is a circular adaptation wherein the keys are first encrypted by the data before the data is then encrypted by the now newly encrypted keys. So this is absolutely a circular type encryption where we take a small amount of data that's going to be encrypted and we use that to encrypt the keys first and then we encrypt that data. So it's, in the case of the counter challenge, the challenge and the test data, they are random numbers encrypted by random numbers that are then re-encrypted by more random numbers. And for certain applications, if processing time is not a concern or consideration, data can also be sent using the same 100% salting, wherein the data being transmitted is used as keys to encrypt the test data. This is a technology that's still under development. So, exponentially compounding. The bisymmetric encryption handshake compounds the data being used within our unique compounding encryption weaving algorithm. That's where CEW comes from in the name. This forces attacking computers to process, instead of our minimum 2,240 bits, those bits are expanded out to nearly 575,000 bits. And in an 8,192-bit key, it expands out to just over 2 million bits. And a 14,000-bit key expands out to 3.6 million bits. Exponential formula. So the bisymmetric encryption handshake forces attacking computers to brute force a multi-level exponentially nested formula, the one here you see on the lower left. Each exponential level in the math formula represents the number of nested processing loops an attacking computer is forced to process. The variations produced by the formula exceed current manufacturable data storage limits. We estimate the time a supercomputer will take to process this type of nested formula will exceed 9.1 times 10 to 113 years. So this is a quick little flow diagram that shows that formula and the processing loops required to process each level of the encryption. And most of these loops will be in 500,000 to 1 million loops each. So, is it really brute force attack proof? I've been asked that a few times. Can you prove it? The saying in the encryption industry is there's no way to prove that something is absolutely attack proof. But the numbers here, the way I would word it was, outside of someone finding an algorithm that could go through it and find this information, these numbers show that it can't be produced or reproduced. So this is the last technical slide. This first row, data is encrypted in discrete data packet sizes between 40 and 256 bytes. So with every type of encryption out there, you cannot take an entire, say, book and encrypt it in one go. They're discrete sizes of, it could be 50 bytes, could be 250 bytes, could be 1,000 bytes. It varies from encryption to encryption. Ours is set up with the smallest data packet of 40 bytes and up to the largest data packet of 256 bytes. So essentially, if you wanted to encrypt 1,000 bytes, you would process 4 of the largest handshakes to encrypt it. So it's also important to note the keys are dramatically larger than the data being encrypted. This is important because this causes the chances of the keys, very large number of possible matching duplicate false positive keys to appear in the test results. So what this means is, because you only have on the left-hand side 40 characters, but you've got nearly 575,000 keys, the same characters are going to show up over and over again after encryption with a large number of with the possible different inputs. So in this case, 10 times 171,000 different variations of inputs would produce the same exact identical output keys. And on the largest handshake, it's 10 to 630,000. Now, the compounding nature of the bisymmetric handshake exponentially expands the number of possible matching duplicates. This is the challenge code, the counter challenge code, and the test keys before it's applied to the original private key, the one that's your credit card or in the card fob, the serial number in the memory. Once it's applied to the original private key, it becomes, on the left-hand side, 10 to the power of 8.7 to 10 to the power of 20. On the right-hand side, for the largest one, this is the size of data that will have to be stored to compare each encryption to the next encryption just to look for a pattern. So 10 to 1.5 times 10 to the power of 23. That is 10 followed by 158 sextillion zeros. This is what I mean by, or this is what we mean by exceeding current manufacturable data storage limits. Now, we took the published information on the Chinese computer and we ran it through the math formula to find out how long that computer would take to execute a brute force attack. And it was 4.2 times 10 to 94 years, or 9.1 times 10 to 113 years for the supercomputer. Now, they published that they were able to do in 2 minutes what could have been done in 10 million years. So basically, we divided by 2 million divided by 24 hours and 360 days to get it down to years, and it only dropped down to 10 to the 102 years and 10 to 84 years on the left. Now, with quantum computers themselves, there's some information out, enough information to have a guesstimate what we could calculate an actual quantum computer would take to process the data. But due to a lack of published material on quantum computers, it's not currently possible to accurately calculate the estimate time a quantum computer will process a bisymmetric encryption handshake. Now, we think that the numbers are going to be 10 to 63 and 10 to 74 years, but there's no guarantee that that's correct or accurate. How do you calculate something that hasn't been built yet to that level? So the value on the left was with a 1 million qubit computer, and the value on the right was calculating using an 8 million qubit computer for comparison. So another feature that is built into our bisymmetric API, or programming interface, is expanding passwords. It's a tool that will expand and encrypt a user's manually typed in password with the unique data found on the computer or smart device, such as software and hardware serial numbers, unique hardware data, and user-stored system data. Expanded passwords forces attacking computers to process passwords that become, say, 256 characters in size, ranging from 0 to 255, or 1,792 characters, ranging also from 0 to 255. Now, when you've gone through courses where they try and explain to you why you have to put characters in and numbers in and capitals to get a bigger range, the larger the range is and the longer the text is, the harder it is for a computer to attack. By combining everything that you've typed in with the data on your computer, it expands it out for you. And on top of that, this allows users to register their computers and smart devices with the server. So if it was your favorite bank and you're logging in, now your computer is registered with that bank. So even if someone were to look over your shoulder and steal your password, or use a malware virus to watch your password get typed in, they can't simply go over to another computer and type in the password and expect to be let in, because that computer is not registered. There's always the chance that someone smart will decompile the software, figure out how it creates the expanded password, but they still can't type it in. They'd have to then trick their computer into thinking that it was typed in, and it can be done, but it's a lot more difficult. And there's a thing further down the road that I'll explain that might help as well. So the last one here, encryption timing results. So this kind of software, how long does it take to actually encrypt it? It's a lot of steps for encryption. So on the right-hand side, I've placed timing results on this computer, medium level computer, for the standard RSA encryption. So 1000-bit RSA encryption is about 125 milliseconds, or 0.125 seconds. The new RSA standard of 2024 bits operates almost at 900 milliseconds, or 0.9 of a second. And then for comparison, our minimum encryption is 2240 bits, and on RSA, it would run at 1.2 seconds. Now, the in-between values shown here is the different handshakes, and based on the size and whether or not the keys needed to be constructed or if they were pre-constructed. So it ranges in time from 6.2 milliseconds up to 75 milliseconds. Once the handshake has been established, on the very left-hand side is the encryption time for all data being processed afterwards. So a 40-byte data packet will run at 0.2 milliseconds, and the post-handshake for the larger one will run at 2.6 milliseconds. Opportunities for the software can be used for e-commerce, computers, smart devices, automotive connectivity, fleet vehicle security, aviation encryption, cloud services, Internet of Things, text messaging, emails, corporate databases, and government and military level encryption. So e-commerce. It is estimated that cyber fraud in all its forms accounts for more than 55% of all cybercrime. Biometric is ideally suited for e-commerce applications. The biometric handshake allows a credit card purchase to be made without actually transmitting the credit card data. Only the purchase price is transmitted in encrypted form. Registering customer computers and smart devices to a credit card as an option also ensures, or could ensure, online purchasing cannot be processed from third-party computers. An optional feature allows for purchaser's credit card and purchasing keys to be combined and encrypted with seller's account keys, so that if stolen, hackers will not be able to extract credit card data. The encryption happens on the credit card servers, transmitted back to the seller for storage, and the keys remain on the credit card servers, allowing the data to be safely stored on third-party servers. Online banking apps. The biometric handshake allows a user to log into a banking app without transmitting their password. This will be helped with password expansion, ensuring that if a password is stolen, it cannot be used from a non-registered computer or smart device. Instructions from a banking app can be transmitted without actually transmitting the instruction commands. This includes internal and external bank transfers, online bill payments, and more. Customer database encryption. The CEW database encryption method will protect government and corporate databases and facilitate secure electronic data transfers. The software works by encrypting and decrypting data as it's passed into and retrieved from a database. The CEW encryption system can securely encrypt a database with up to 91 million bit keys. cloud services, and online services. This is expanding on the database encryption. More and more companies are now relying upon cloud-based data services. Database queries can be sent using a special bisymmetric handshake still under development, wherein 100% salting is used to enable database login credentials to never be transmitted directly. Same with the queries, and the same with the query results. So you can type in your query, random data is created, encrypted by random data, and then re-encrypted by random data and sent. And the computer is able to decipher that. Computers and smart devices. Bisymmetric and CEW encryption can be used on any computer, smart device, and almost any Internet of Things hardware devices. Mobile vehicle computer systems. With the use of bisymmetric encryption handshake, a vehicle will be able to safely and securely receive activation commands from a key fob or remote control system. Using the bisymmetric handshake, the command codes are never actually directly sent. Smartphones and smartwatches can be easily set up to work in place of a key fob and securely receive and upload software upgrades and fixes. I should just say the automotive industry is looking into further encrypting due to several recent hacks of vehicles and mobile vehicle security fleet vehicle security. Bisymmetric encryption can be used by private, commercial, government, military fleets to monitor and evaluate vehicle performance, location, fuel consumption, driver communications, and other related information. It can also be used for aviation and UAV encryption. And additional opportunities include text messaging, emails, Bluetooth encryption to ensure conversations cannot be listened in on, VPN, remote logins, private sector, government security logins, and a vast number of other opportunities. And then future hardware technologies. We've given a great deal of thought to this. Future hardware technology applications includes creating bisymmetric-enabled tap cards, dongles, and plug-in devices, tap devices, hard programmed to process the bisymmetric encryption directly. Bisymmetric programmed tap-enabled bank and credit cards would be secure against walk-by credit card scanning and hacking technologies, as well as POS swapping vulnerabilities. Users could optionally buy a USB plug-in tap device, and possible future computers could incorporate the tap pads directly into them, which would protect against keystroke watching malware viruses for uses such as using company-issued swipe cards to allow users to log into protected corporate systems and to allow secure purchases from home using a bisymmetric-enabled tap feature of a bank or credit card. The power of this would be, if anyone watched your keyboard, it wouldn't help them because the card is doing encryption for you. And it has the data stored on it. And so there are a few examples that we've created for our proof of concept softwares. We created a remote keyless system for a car fob built into a smartwatch. We created a credit card purchasing system and a simulated banking app. And I guess this is where we get to answer questions anyone might have.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chad. Does anyone have any questions? Just put them in the chat. So thank you so much, Chad. So where are you guys currently right now in your in the industry?
Hey, Brandon, it's Dave. Let me just do a little summary before we get any questions. And the first thing is I just wanted to go over Kenrick's 4 little points of how CEW, so that gives you an idea where we're in the industry. Business email compromise. Sorry, guys, we can't help you right now. Right now, it doesn't mean we can't in the future. We're working on that. But that's all about education to your staff. I mean, I hate to say it, but the Mattel guy who sent the money should have been sending a new email separately to his boss to say, did you really send this? I mean, it's all education. But insider threats, Chad went over how we have password protections all registered to certain devices. Now, as computers came along, and I'm an ex-IBM computer engineer, we all started loving the remote profiles that we could sit down at any desk, log in, and have access to everything we had from our real computer, our assigned computer. That in itself brought all the cybersecurity and all the hacking. That was sort of the start of it, because people could trap your passwords with malware. You didn't even know somebody, your coworker would put a malware on their own computer to trap what you did when you logged on and used their computer. We have now prevented that. So that's one of the great parts about CEW encryption. The expected, the next one, the endpoint security. Well, that's what cybersecurity, encryption is all about. And that's where we dominate. So basically you can't, if you trap it, if you use Wireshark and grab all the data, it's totally useless. So endpoint security is what we're after. And we have so many different examples of where it can be applied. And the last one, of course, is ransomware. We can't help you there at all. We are working on malware encryption too, like to detect certain things. But, you know, there's a lot to go. We're really concentrating on the three things Chad showed at the end with the car fobs, because it is 10 seconds or less to steal a car right now. And there's one more thing. We're all going to be driving in autonomous vehicles soon. Well, they've already hacked into computers, onboard computers, because they're all wirelessly. Even computers aren't wired in cars anymore. They use wireless semi-encrypted systems to talk to each component, each different hardware, the steering, the braking. That's all wirelessly done now. If you hack that, you can take over a car. So we've also developed an encryption system to put in all those pieces inside the car so you can hack the car. That's one of the greatest things. And again, fleet security, it's the same idea, is all that data you're downloading cannot be taken by a competitor and things like that. Because there's a lot more information that you get in a fleet system that's on the market today than we actually show on the slide, because there's some things we don't want to reveal. So we're working on a lot of different things, and basically right now we have 3 or 4 ready to go, and that's what we're going. So where we are today is basically endpoint security, insider threats, and wireless. And wireless is just not cars. It applies to UAVs, military or others. Anything that's transmitted through the air, we can encrypt it in such a way that you cannot de-encrypt it. You cannot get the data, because wireless is so easy to grab. You just get the right frequency, log everything, record it, and then work on it. One thing I don't think came through is that our encryption changes randomly too. So it's not the same keys constantly. So even by the time you got it, those keys are long gone. We've created new ones by then. So that's where we're at right now. Jason, hopefully that answered your question. And do you have any questions from the people that are on?
Yeah, I actually have a question from John. John asked, sorry if I missed it, if you already spoke about this, but what about man-in-the-middle attacks? Are they essentially rendered useless?
They are. That's what got us started. We have basically come up with a system that gets rid of or prevents man-in-the-middle attacks, gets rid of brute force. Like we've done scenarios where you've got 2 people in a coffee shop, and one's trapping what the other one's doing. That's a man-in-the-middle attack, because she's logging on and getting her bank account information. Our encryption system, just put it this way, the data he's going to get is false. Millions and millions of possible combinations that just don't work. And Chad, you can go further on that one.
Yeah, I guess a good analogy that I like to use is think of back to, there's a famous challenge and counter challenge from World War II. On D-Day, if 2 soldiers came across each other, it was flash and thunder. So you would say flash, and the other person would say thunder. Now, our challenge and counter challenge, every time you send out a challenge code, a different counter challenge is created randomly and sent back. So you would come up and you would say flash, and the answer would have to be thunder. But if you got it wrong and you say flash again, it's now lightning. And if you got that wrong, then now it's cloud, and then it's bunny, and then it's car, and then it's grasshopper, and it changes every single time. So the man-in-the-middle attack doesn't work because every time you try to chase that challenge code, it's changed. You can't go and do a brute force attack where you're going, okay, 0001. No, that didn't work. 002. No, that didn't work. 003. Because every time the challenge code is different. There's never the same one twice. And it can record the number of failed attempts so that in the case of a car, if it sees attempts of, let's say, 50, for sake of number, if someone's pushing their unlock button or their beat button to get closer and closer to figure out where their car is, if it hits, say, a count of 50, it instantly knows someone's trying to brute force attack me and starts honking the horn. I hope that explains the man in the middle part. So we do have the website listed below, cws.com. On the main page, we've actually put together a number of videos that demonstrate different aspects of the software, not just what it can be used for, but how it works in general. And there's a whole section on the actual man-in-the-middle attack.
Okay, perfect. Now, I have another question when you're ready, Chad.
Yep.
So one question came up is, can you talk about your encryption to protect data transfer in drones?
Yes. It's the same as the car fob example. So the way the drone would work is your remote control and the drone both have identical serial numbers that they use to create their private keys. They communicate and exchange a set of the challenge code and then the counter challenge code, which is called the session keys. The session keys are then stored and used for future transmissions. That's where once you've established an approval, you can then use that session key to transmit bidirectionally your data. Now, if you don't change your session keys, eventually someone might be able to find a pattern. So the session keys can be periodically updated. They can be randomly generated periodic, or they could be a timed amount, or just simply an iterator count. But yes, it can be used for both directions once the handshake is established.
And there's one more thing. We actually send the controls to that drone without actually sending the command codes. That's the salted data system and how we generate the randomized data back and forth. So if you're controlling and trying to take a military drone to certain GPS coordinates, you are not transmitting any of that data because it's all salted in the transmissions.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing to hear kind of the evolution of encryption and what you guys are doing for the industry.
Thank you.
Well, we also get to say we can basically say that we're quantum proof because nobody can prove otherwise. Again, nobody's built a million qubit quantum machine. And the other thing is no other companies come forward to say that they have anything close to what we've done. So we're kind of ahead of everybody right now, and we're hoping to see a little bit more traction on that soon.
That's perfect. I'd love to see, and I think I would speak for everyone to just kind of see where you guys are in the next, Q1, Q2 of next year.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're approaching this as a system space instead of the other quantum encryption. The algorithms out there are just algorithms that just do the encryption. They don't expand passwords. They don't do the salted data. They don't transmit codes without transmitting the codes. We're trying to do this as a system. With the potential of using hardware, swipe cards. So the one thought was, if you wanted to set up, let's say, we'll use Disney Plus as an example, because when they started their service, they actually got hacked. The reason why they got hacked is a lot of customers were using the same passwords that they had previously used. So the hackers who had stolen these passwords just started brute force attacking the Disney system, hoping that they had reused the passwords, which in some cases they did, and they were able to get in. So if we were to offer a service where you could buy from us a swipe card and a tap pad that you plug into your laptop, then when you go to log into a new service, in this case, say Disney Plus, you can register your tap card from us with the Disney system so that it's using our bisymmetric encryption. And it can't be intercepted or hacked or watched with a malware virus because the swipe card is doing the encryption, not the computer. And if we add in the ability to type in a 4-digit passcode, just like you have with a bank card, that makes it so that if someone actually steals your swipe card, they can't use it. Just same as your existing bank card, more than 4 times, and it says no more. And that will basically provide use for you for at home or for in a corporate environment. You could use the same swipe card with a security system to swipe into the building, sit down at a computer, tap your swipe card onto the port, and then it lets you log into the computer and into the systems.
Wow.
Yeah, so Jason, that's one of our future endeavors is the smart card, working with the smart card people, the association, to include an encryption system on it. So that would negate anybody being able to grab your information with the old skimmers, which are still out there. And I'm sure Kenrick would attest to that. They might not be a physical skimmer, but they're done wirelessly with sensors, because for $35, I can buy what I need off Amazon or eBay to get your data. It's that simple. So the card is going to be the encryption engine, and they will get encrypted data that's totally useless.
So I just have one more question from George. George asked, Chad, are you connected to the former Google CEO, Eric Schmidt?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I would ask, is he connected?
We'll wait till George responds to that. Cynthia came up with a question. How will your actual transaction be processed? Is it only in the cloud? Is there an option for your solution to be on-prem if clients want to have it on site? Is the maturity or performance of dated or interrupted wired or wireless performance a consideration to adopting your technology?
Well, that's easy, Chad. All of the above. We are wired, wireless. We are in the cloud. We are on-prem. We have licensing models for all of that.
Perfect. Do you have any other questions, Cynthia? Just let me know. And then, this has been great, Chad and Dave. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out and just explain your new technology.
I guess the further question or answer George's question. We have tried to reach out to different large corporations, and it seems that the really large corporations have a Hollywood type communication policy of, we will contact you, don't contact us. They literally, a lot of them have set up so that you actually cannot directly contact anyone. You might be able to get a low-level person, but as far as any of the upper management, they're very well removed. You have to get introduced through someone to the people that level of a company. So,
okay.
But on the same time, I'm sorry, Brandon. On the same time, we have been introduced to a lot of the ISACs, which is the information cybersecurity groups in the U.S. for aviation, automobile, finance, and they're the ones that look at solutions, and they're all basically talking to us. So, but Chad's right; it's hard to get into some of these big businesses.
And then this is for George. He just made a comment. Just seems a person you ought to know regarding tap to a lead tech industry panel in the White House since leaving Google. Schmidt has extended his services to the Pentagon, which with a focus on machine learning. He has also led the Defense Innovation Board of the Pentagon and National Security Compliance on AI, which advised the Congress that the U.S. needs to allocate. So, George, let me say this. If you have that contact, you can always reach out to Chad and Dave. They have their email addresses on the screen right now, just to continue this conversation, because if you have a relationship with them, I'm sure they'd be interested to talk to them.
Hey, Brandon, I see Cynthia said that she has contacts in MS and IBM possibly. Yeah, unfortunately, I left IBM quite a few years ago as a computer engineer, and all my people that I know have all retired.
So yeah, I
That
mean,
would be wonderful. Wonderful. We could reach out and talk to you a little bit later.
so I mean that's great, guys. If you guys have contacts and you guys can think of the expansion this and you want to reach out to Dave and Chad, please do. I'm sure they'll be open to have that discussion and just learn how the industry would, as you guys see it as users of cybersecurity and the environment, how they can expand. Now I have a question for yourself, Chad and Dave. Any golden nuggets, any kind of recommendations you have for the people that are still here? And thank you so much, everyone that stuck around for the 2 hours. Any recommendations that you have for these guys?
The recommendation I can give right now is a lot of education of employees and trying to prevent as much as possible as we're working on changing things. But CEW encryption is going to be a big game changer, and it's our goal to get rid of the bad people. And I think we're going to, so watch out for CEW's announcements and peer review papers and everything coming out in 2021. We have a lot of things being reviewed right now, including our solution by some academia. And we're really hoping that we'll be publishing all this at the very beginning of the year. And at that point, we're open for business. Not that we're not open for business now. We've already got, customers, I could say, but at this point, we want to hit the mainstream.
Oh, that's perfect. So guys, this has been a great event. I'm going to bring James on too. James, I don't know if you have any housekeeping, anything that you want to share.
Not really. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight. Next month will be already past Christmas and New Year's. So we would like to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone here. When we do come back, we will be talking about the CMMC accreditation process between the world and the US government. So good things to come. Stay tuned for that. And thanks again for coming tonight.
Yeah, I mean, has anyone here kind of worked with the DoD and kind of doing that and following the CMMC? Just put in the chat. I'd like to know because, like James is saying, we're going to be talking about that in the new year. There's been a lot of changes. Things are going on. Just one thing I want to recommend: stay safe. I know there's a lot of changes going on with the pandemic, depending on which area you're in, where you are in the country or even the world. There's been talks about the increase of lockdowns in different areas and more restrictions. So, over the holidays, just make sure you're staying safe, talking to family and friends through phone call, video chat, things along that line. Like Kendrick said, be safe when you're going online. A lot of people are doing online shopping right now. So be careful of what you're clicking on, where you're going and where you're entering your credit card information. And then if it happens, knock on wood, if you don't get compromised, but if you do, at least Kendrick has given you some recommendations, advice, and even who to contact if it comes to that situation. So that's kind of my tip for this holidays. Just be safe and really kind of connect with family and friends right now, because a lot of people are going through a lot of hard times when it comes to COVID. So just make sure you share this with a family or friends, that are interested in cybersecurity, want to know more about it. Have them join the Meetup group, because that's the best way to kind of get information on the events and everything that's going on. We want to learn about you guys and share information on what's going on in the industry. As much as you guys, give us feedback and share what your experiences and your insights are, helps us to kind of give information to the speakers and the experts to, collaborate, because it's a big industry of, cybersecurity, but it's a small community. We know each other, we share information, we help each other grow. So thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it. And yeah, like James said, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and just have a safe New Year.